in the Japanese lexicon for centuries, but it has reached wider awareness due in part to its inclusion in a few books. Miko Kamiya's 1966 On the Meaning of Life, Dan Buettner's 2010 The Blue Zones, and Francisco Miralles and Hector Garcia's 2016's Ikigai, The Japanese Secret to a Long and Happy Life. So again, the Dash community is made up of individuals. Akin to an organism and cells, the health of the organism ultimately hinges on the health of the cells, and on their collaborative efforts. Case in point, Ujanem6, who has been involved behind the scenes since Dash was Darkcoin. His coding chops, both creating anew and reviewing the work of others, has been integral to Dash's solid foundation and many industry firsts. Like a family, we are not going it alone. So call it love for brother or simply goodwill. Let's take a moment to do an assessment using Ikigai as a tool so that we can individually be more fulfilled and so that we can possibly identify new collaborative undertakings that should be pursued.
There are 4 components that you need to check off in order to achieve Ikigai.
What you love. Anyone involved in the Dash community is not here due to coercion, but because they choose to be here. As such, it's likely that they love or at least like the project. Check. What the world needs.
Something the world needs means that you can provide value through whatever you're doing. It means that there is a demand for your talent or service.
Certainly, Dash, as it exists now, with its lack of friction and optional privacy, is a hell of a lot better medium of exchange than that offered by regimes and central banks. And we are never satisfied. We continue to identify low-hanging fruit, lines of code that could be made more succinct, terminology that could be made more accessible, tools that can lower the barrier to entry, use cases that can onboard many. Check. What you can be paid for.
Money is what puts a roof over your head, food in your mouth, and clothes on your body. Without enough of it, you're going to spend the majority of your time stressed out of your mind, wondering how you're going to get by.
Dash has a treasury.
And it is this treasury bit that allows us to fund everything that's required on the network in order to be a money as a service provider.
Anyone creating value can apply for, and if signed off by Masternode owners, can be compensated for their work. Further, compensation can come not through the treasury but by creating a service, such as the hosting of full or partial masternodes, as done by Slawick and the gents at CrowdNode. Check. What you are good at. This includes not just inborn skill, but acquired skill. You may not have started as a coder, but after thousands of hours you've cultivated the skill. You may not have been the best communicator or ambassador, but after many interviews or document updates, you have honed your craft. Check.
Finding your Ikigai requires deep experimentation and self-exploration. By pursuing concrete actions and reflecting back thoughtfully.
While the focus in the cryptosphere is often on the technology, it's important we don't overlook the base unit in this equation, each of us and our well-being. By viewing our individual actions through the lens of Ikigai, we can have a more dynamic, collaborative Dash community and an even greater impact as we together build unstoppable money.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Incubator Weekly today.
Thank you.
How are you, Ryan?
Good to be here. I unfortunately missed a lot of that intro because I have this extension on my browser that speeds video up. So it was like playing at 2x and then it would pause and then play it over again. So I had to exclude StreamYard from that, but I got it fixed. But I'll have to watch that intro again. It looked really good. It looked like a lot of DAO stuff.
Well, appropriately so, because today we have Master over at DAO Watch Cryptosi as our guest. How are you today, Cryptosi?
Hi, guys. Yeah, I'm great. It's great to be here.
We're so glad to have you.
Yeah, I was
Ryan is actually, yes. Ryan, will you tell us more about Cryptosi so that we can brag about him and he doesn't have to brag about himself?
Yeah. I saw Cryptosi's show probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 months ago, probably early when it first started. It's called DAO Watch. If anybody hasn't seen it yet, we'll post links to it. But I've been watching that, I think, since it started. I just saw some Reddit links to it a long time ago, and I've watched it, and I didn't say anything about it because Cryptosi was giving the Dash Incubator way too much praise, and so I didn't want to highlight that. But now that he's given us some criticism, I did want to highlight it. Because I think it's a great show, not just for the Dash content, but also for DAOs in general. DAOs are, I think, probably the most important thing in crypto as far as I'm concerned, outside of being money itself. Like the DAO aspect, the decentralized organizations that grow around these cryptocurrency projects is where the real lifeblood is. And so that's why I wanted to have Cryptosi on to kind of talk about that. And he's had exposure to a lot of other DAOs, not just Dash, but things like PIVX and some of the Ethereum-based DAOs as well. And I think he's even created his own DAO for the DAO. Yes. So maybe he can talk a little bit about that as we're discussing things. But I wanted to have him on to talk about why he thinks that's so important to have a show about it exclusively dedicated to DAOs, and what he's learned in being exposed to all these different kinds of DAOs and what we can learn from Dash in Dash.
Yeah, please. Tell us, how did you even get interested in DAOs in the first place, Cryptosi?
Well, Amanda, it's mostly your fault because I shouldn't say grew up, but when I first got into crypto, one of the shows I used to watch was the Daily Decrypt, and there was a lot of talk about the DAOs on Dash and privacy, etc., etc. To be honest with you, I wasn't really that fussed about the privacy at the time. I didn't really see I didn't realize the importance of it at the time. But then what had happened was I was, say, a community member within Dash, and Dash decided to go down the road of focusing on being digital currency as opposed to focusing on privacy. And it wasn't so much that the decision was the correct decision or the wrong decision, but the thing that got to me was that the decision was made, I felt, in the wrong way. So the people who held Dash or used Dash, or even the Masternode owners, weren't polled at all. The decision was just made by the higher ups, and the rest is history. From there, a bunch of people who were also disgruntled went on and created PIVX, which at the time was called, I can't remember, Darknet or something equally silly. And over time, they focused on privacy and carried on. But what really I felt we always lacked was a focus on the DAOs. So there's different aspects to the DAOs that I feel like we didn't focus on. I guess we can discuss more about those as we go on, but basically that was how I got into DAOs. It was just the realization that having these cryptocurrencies is one thing, but then organizing and deciding the direction of these cryptocurrencies is a totally different one. And that's where I feel like we really need to start to harness DAOs a little bit more.
Snap.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people might question that whole premise of like governance in cryptos and say like, well, we don't need governance. Why are we creating a government and a central bank around these cryptocurrencies? That's not what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to be completely decentralized. But that's definitely not my opinion. I think of these things more like if you had a combustion engine, right? But you didn't really know what it was or how to use it. You might just think that there's engine underneath it, that you can actually get places that you want to go with this vehicle. And so I think a lot of people are treating cryptos like this vehicle with this amazing combustion engine inside of it, but they're just treating it like a storage space. Like you hear about this store of value kind of thing, but and so people are just kind of using this vehicle as a place to store their like mountain gear and stuff and bikes, and just putting it in the trunk, but it's not actually getting anywhere. But the whole premise behind an economy is that you not only store value, but you create value. And it's that creating value that is where the DAOs come in. You can argue whether DAOs are creating value or not, but right now, like with the store of value kind of narrative, I think that Bitcoin can get away with that as long as they can siphon value from fiat, so that like the fiat economy is creating the value and Bitcoin kind of siphons it off, but that comes to an end at some point. But anyway, let's get into some of the bullet points, I guess. Talk about.
It's always kind of puzzled me that anybody thinks it's even possible to have no governance. Kind of the way it's also puzzling that I've heard people say, oh, well, so many of the masternodes don't vote. It is clear to me that not voting is implying an abstain. That is their vote. They abstain. And similarly, there is no network that has no governance. Even in like a network like Bitcoin, like you said, Rion, the miners are governing. Even if people believe that they're not, they 100% are.
Best case scenario. There at least, I think there are other organizations that are governing Bitcoin as well, personally.
Well, I mean, we remember like years ago when there was like an actual in-person meetup, right? Where various corporate developments like asked miners to sign paper contracts that they would or wouldn't do something. Yeah, so there's no such thing as no governance.
It's only explicit or hidden, right? So Dash and PIVX and folks like that have explicit DAOs, they decide to make their governance explicit, and so you can see the governance. And that's where I think a lot of people come in with a lot of criticisms, because they can now see the sausage being made.
Right.
But it's not better than just not seeing the sausage made, right?
Yeah.
I'd rather see it made so I know what's going on.
I think also there's an element of when people start talking about DAOs and we use words like vote, it automatically equate it to what we would know as democracy. So we automatically start to think, oh, well, everybody should vote, everybody must vote, and we tend to view it in the same way as we would view like our own representative democracies. And it's slightly different when we're voting within a DAO, and I would liken it more to when a shareholder votes. And generally, if you're a shareholder in a company, generally you don't vote, and often it's not really an abstain as much as it's an I trust you guys to keep the status quo going. So the not voting is it's problematic, but sometimes it's given a bit more airplay than it really deserves. And one of the reasons really why I started DAO Watch was so that the engagement in governance, which, as we just discussed, or as was just mentioned, the governance in projects like Dash and PIVX, the governance isn't as absolute as it is within some of the, let's say, the Cosmos chains, where a governance proposal can actually change the way a chain behaves. Within Dash, you can put a governance proposal forward and say, oh, I think the chain should do X, Y, and Z. And if the developers decide to do it, then fine, it gets done. But it's still down to the miners. If the miners decide not to do it, they still get the ultimate say. So sometimes we use the word vote, and then automatically, as soon as we use the word vote, we suddenly make it this all-encompassing thing. I think that's something that we should really hone in on when discussing DAOs and when considering voting and these sorts of things.
So then going from that, David Holiday says we need task governance, too much money flowing out and no value coming in. Does anyone know what task governance means?
I don't know what task governance means. No, I'm assuming he means what we have now, and maybe a bit more, not responsibility. What's the word?
Accountability.
Accountability, exactly. Maybe that's what he means. I think with a comment like that, what I would say is that what's coming back in is often not quantifiable. So, for example, well, we may make this show, and somebody may sit down and watch the show, and because they've watched the show, they may go and do something else, and we're not going to know that the fact that we've spent money on this show is going to make something else happen down the line. So I think the quantifiable side, and that comes from the proposal reporting, but not only that, but sometimes it just comes from people's own intuition or however we view it. But I think the gains that we make from the proposals that are put in are not always quantifiable, and very often they're not quantifiable. For example, if you pay for some delegates to go to a conference, and they meet people, and a few months down the line, those people put in proposals, the fact that they went to the conference probably won't be referenced. And then critics could then come back and say, okay, well, you guys went to the conference, but what came out of it, or what was in it for us? So I feel like in those types of situations, what people need to do, or what I try to do, I don't really like to tell people what to do, but what I try to do is I try to find the value. I try to find where the value is within proposals that have gone through and work has been done. If they've actually completed the things that they've set out to do, if they've delivered their deliverables, then I try to find, okay, what else have we gained from this which is not a deliverable? Are these videos making the channel pick up speed with the YouTube algorithm, so in the future when we put forward videos, more people are going to see them? All of these things which are not easily quantifiable, I feel need to be assessed before we start to complain that there's not enough money coming in. We need to really consider what actually is coming in. How are we gaining?
So speaking of your assessments, what is your take, Cryptosi, on the current state of, say, Dash's treasury, and like particularly the Masternode yields and the inflation rate? Kind of what we were talking about with Doc Agnew's research proposal in the Incubator recently, if you saw that.
Yeah, I did. I did see it. I feel before I will dial in on that, there are some factors which are very important, which are the negative parts. That will start with the negative parts of the Dash DAO, the negative parts of the PIVX DAO. And there are some. And these are, first of all, that only Masternode holders can vote. So if somebody has, in the case of Dash 990 Dash, then they get basically no vote at all. They can have a say. They can go on the forums, and they can go onto Reddit like I did, and they can put forward whatever they think. But in the grand scheme of things, it means quite little because they don't actually get a vote. And the same with PIVX. The threshold is higher, the coin is lower, but you need 9,900. You need 10,000. You've got 9,000, you've got no vote. I think that's very much problematic. And the fact that we've had the DAOs, we've had these things alive for, I guess in Dash's years, 6-7 years. In PIVX's case, quite close to the same, in 5-6 years. We've had these things alive for this long, and we haven't tackled that. I feel like that's an oversight on our behalf. We've built this thing, and we're kind of like, okay, it's fine, and then we're trying to shoehorn things into it. So with this issue we've got now, it's not really an issue, but this thing that Rion's put forward, one of the main points that I see before we even start to discuss is, how do we poll everybody? How do we ask everybody? And it's not only the people who have got a Masternode, it's the people who may have 2,000 Dash but not have a Masternode. They might just have their coins private, held for whatever reason. It's the people who use Dash all the time, or who are paid in Dash. They may not even hold a significant amount, but the velocity of the money that they use, it's a benefit to the network. They're a part of the network. They don't get a say. How do we poll them for a say? Something like this, I feel, with the question, whether or not I agree with increasing the emissions or speeding up the emissions, I feel like the problem is that we're asking the people who are going to benefit from the emissions as to whether or not we should make the change. And as a Masternode owner, it's easy for me to say, okay, yeah, well, I want more money, of course I do, but is it better for the network? And I could say, okay, yeah, I feel like it is, but
by the network, you mean specifically the people that aren't able to vote, like you're saying, or and what would you say to somebody who might retort and say, Well, you can vote with anything over 1 Dash by putting your Dash in CrowdNode, and not only do you get a vote with that proportional to your holdings, but you actually get an outsized vote because of how the voting works in CrowdNode. There's a certain factor by which your vote is multiplied because of those who don't vote. So those who don't vote, or at least not those who don't say do nothing, their votes get allocated to the ones that do vote. So if you are one of the voters, you get not only your own vote, but the votes that the people that aren't voting, you get their votes as well, proportional to your allocation.
It would be difficult. I don't really know the ins and outs of the CrowdNode service, so it'd be difficult.
Can I just say there it's not. I remember I must not have read the proposal or not understood it, or I don't know. I remember when the vote went up for CrowdNode to develop trustless Masternode shares, I was just so pumped because it's like, hey, this is what we've wanted for years, right? Like what Cryptosi is talking about, that anybody who owns even 1 Dash could vote, at least, however it would work with multiple people voting. How would the single node vote? However that would work. And I didn't realize until it launched and I went to use it that it involves custody at first for an indefinite amount of time. So, if in case that clears it up for you, Cryptosi, and as for, maybe why more people don't utilize it, is that it is in fact custodial for a certain period of time. So there's still not, decentralized or trustless Masternode shares. Those still do not exist.
Yeah, and I think that's so that's what I didn't want to say without actually knowing it. But if I have to hand my Dash over to someone else, I'm likely not to do it. I feel also there may be some issues with how I don't know how the maths works with them and how they decide to make sure that my one vote does actually count as one vote, because I feel like if they have a higher percentage of their people voting in a certain way, then they're going to have to vote yes or no. I guess they can't vote in a fraction. But either way, for me, I feel like unless I can do it directly on chain without anybody else, I don't want to have to trust people. Not to say that I shouldn't be able to, but I don't want to have to trust people. And I feel like that what I would say is it's a step in the right direction. And if you've got it in a wallet and I don't know that all of that is happening, maybe it's a bit of a dishonest step, but it's a step in the right direction. Or I just feel like the ultimate way or the best way would be for me to keep my Dash in my wallet as I do with my Masternode, keep custody of my own funds and still be able to vote. But I feel even that is not perfect, because I may have just had my Dash for a short length of time. I feel like if someone's had their Dash for a longer length of time, maybe their vote should be weighted heavier. If somebody's wallet transacts more, maybe their vote should be weighted heavier. That's probably easily gained, but there are things like that. If maybe someone who spent more fees with the network, maybe their wallet should be more heavily weighted. There are so many other things that I think we should be considering, or we could be considering, that would make our decision-making processes that much better. I feel like also something that was touched on, that Amanda just touched on, was when the proposal was written. Now, some people like myself are not a great fan of reading for long periods of time. If somebody makes a show and talks to me about something, I would much rather learn that way. If Rion had put through his ideas or his pre-discussion ideas about the emission in a long blog post, I more than likely would have never bothered to read it. The fact I get to see his face and I get that, I can garner more information from it as you can discuss. You can garner more information when you're discussing with people face to face. I feel that really helps, and I think that's also something that we haven't really utilized within our DAOs. So much of it is text based, and because of that, I think you lose quite a lot of the information, or at least the feeling behind what someone is trying to get across with a proposal. So you can't really help them to improve it as well when it's just text. Sorry.
So this question that just came up, Ryan, do you think that this has this been answered, or is this something that can still be answered here?
I think it can still. Let's read it. So what crypto networks seemed to have governance mostly figured out? What changes, if any, would you suggest for Dash? And I think that's probably more of a question for Cryptosi, since he's seen more action from different DAOs. Have you seen anybody that's got it figured out, Cryptosi?
Yes. Right. So I think currently in the lead are the Cosmos chains. So their governance works in a way whereby not only can they delegate their votes to their validators, because they're kind of like a proof of stake. Right. So the Cosmos chains, what they work is with like a DPoS. So you can stake via
delegated proof of stake.
Right, absolutely. So you can stake via giving your tokens to someone else, your coins to someone else. Those people can then vote on your behalf, or you can vote yourself. I think that's slightly better. So that way you don't have to vote on everything. There's an idea called a panarchy, where everything that comes up, everybody gets a vote on. Now that takes a lot of time and you get voter fatigue. Now, someone like me, I like about 4 or 5 networks. There's no way I can read through all of the proposals on all of the networks and look after my child and make my wife laugh. It's just not enough hours in a day. So I feel they've got it sorted from that point of view. There are also people who are on the fringes. I feel like a lot of the best ideas are from people on the fringes. And there's 2 people, one woman called Lordana and a man called Christian something or other. And they're really pushing the ideas of what can be done, but they're actually building these things and they're actually putting them out there. They're not getting that much traction. And so the proof, I guess, is in the pudding, and we haven't, en masse, we haven't tasted it yet. But I would say currently, the Cosmos chains are probably in the lead from a efficiency point of view, but then obviously Ethereum's probably in the lead from a point of view of the tooling around DAOs. They've got the most tooling around DAOs, Ethereum. That's mostly because they've got smart contracts and a ton of development power. So it's between those two. I feel that the Masternode governance coins are falling behind because we're not building either on a social level or more importantly on a technical level. We're not building and we're not improving. So
is the main difference between a Masternode voting system and a delegated proof of stake voting system, is the main difference that there's that criteria of X amount of like 1,000 Dash and Dash, where you can't vote like we discussed already below that amount, and with the Cosmos and delegated proof of stake chains, you can vote with even one single unit in a trustless way.
I feel like that's equal. I feel yes and no. I feel like the fact that you can hand over your vote to someone else, I feel that's a massive deal, because a lot of the time when things come up, there'll be people who know more than you. So if we have a vote, like if we're discussing the emissions for Dash, there are people who might know more than me.
So you're actually delegating your vote, not just your coins, in order to get a vote.
Yes, you're optionally.
That's working better.
Yeah,
like representative democracy.
Yes, but optional. So if I feel like there's a proposal that comes up that I actually want to vote on, then I go and vote on it. If I decide not to, then you can vote on it on my behalf. That's I feel like that's probably the best case scenario, because I can vote if I want to. If I feel like I don't want to, I can allow my validator to vote for me.
And the validators have, I mean, there are a lot fewer of them, and they kind of they have to build up reputations, right? Because how would anybody even know to whom they might delegate their vote if there weren't, firstly, like far fewer options than thousands of masternodes, and secondly, if these people didn't have ongoing reputations as being specialized in this or that.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. On the bad side, of course, it just becomes a popularity contest, which is not that much of a meritocracy at all. If there was YouTubers there, they would get all the votes and not necessarily make the right decisions. On the other side, it doesn't force, but it encourages, it incentivizes engagement. So it incentivizes these people to engage the community on behalf of the governance. So it incentivizes them to come and say, or not only the governance, but the security also incentivizes them to say, okay, come to us because we are doing X, Y, and Z. Generally, it's not really because they're doing anything particularly cool with governance. It's usually because they're developing something, they're building something, or they're going to give someone an airdrop. That's generally what they go for. But the option is there. So yeah, you're right. It can become a popularity contest, but at the same time, it means you have to try to be popular, and that means engagement.
Right. Out of curiosity, like what percentage of them are doxed, so to speak, versus what percent are just online handles?
I don't know. I wouldn't know. I wouldn't really want to guess. I think the most important part of that is that they don't have to be doxed. So if they want to be doxed, they can. They don't have to be doxed. I feel like if they are doxed, then there's more chance people are going to trust them and delegate to them. The network itself will punish the delegate or the validators. Sorry, the network itself will punish the validators if they behave incorrectly. So you don't really have to worry about losing your money. Worry about them voting consistently. If they're doxed or they're not doxed, I think it doesn't really matter. So I'm not really sure. Whenever I look through validators, personally, I don't look to see if they're doxed or not. It makes quite little difference to me, regardless of doxing.
So we had three items that we wanted to touch on that all related to one main idea, which was the pros and cons of varying ideas to improve the Dash DAO. So there's been a few ideas that have come forth. One was Agnew's, which we talked about. In other words, also known as Michael, his idea to temporarily increase the emissions of Dash, and by doing so, increase the Masternode yield as well as the potential amount in our DAO to give out to people. We discussed that. You had some criticisms about that. I don't know if we have time to go into those. I wanted to talk about a little bit. I wanted to address some of those criticisms.
We'd better. I put it in the title of the show.
Yeah, but before we do that one, I wanted to real briefly talk about the two other ideas that weren't from Agnew. One of them is currently up right now, and that's Foro's idea to grant leftover treasury funds to the Masternode owners. What do you think of that? And do you know of anybody else who has done that or is considering that? And do you know about that proposal?
Yeah, I think I read it briefly a few days ago. I think it puts I think it automatically puts the onus, automatically incentivizes Masternode owners to say no to proposals, and I think that's not a good idea. I think already the fact that if the funds aren't spent from the treasury, they're not created. I think that already is incentive enough for the Masternode owners to vote correctly. Plus, they want the chain to do well, so they're going to vote correctly. I don't feel that there is a need to add that.
You don't think it needs to be harder for Masternode?
No, yeah, I don't think so. I feel like if we want better proposals, then we have to create better social systems around the tooling that we've already got. I think that's how we get better proposals. I think that's by you guys making these shows, having these discussions more often, more posts, more meetups around it, those sorts of things. Then we get better proposals and better reporting as well. Then we get better proposals.
One note on that, just so that it's said, because Foro would be mad at me. He already is very mad at me for some reason, but he would be even more mad at me if I didn't say the the other point to what you're saying is I think that he would say that's the whole point of the proposal is to make it harder for proposal owners to get funding, because otherwise, it might just be waste. And the only way to really improve the proposals is to let Masternode owners have more skin in the game, where they have to actually give some of their quote own money to fund these proposals, and that will therefore make the proposals better. So just real briefly, what would you say to that retort?
Yeah, I think there's enough skin in the game. I think also it's important to say for Firo, I don't know if I've got his name wrong, but it's important to say that I don't think he should be upset about it. I think it's a good idea. It's a good suggestion. It's a good thing to discuss. It's definitely a thing that should be put forward and discussed. And then we decide, do we feel like Masternode owners have enough skin in the game? And generally, I would say, yes, they do. They already do have enough skin in the game. We don't need to give them more. We don't need to reward them for voting down proposals. And that's the way it will be seen. But
the other thing that he would say, sorry to interject, is he would say, they actually wouldn't do that. Like it is in their interest to vote up and grant funding to proposals that actually are going to help Dash, and so but they wouldn't actually vote them down.
No, but they would, and I guess the only way we can see is if we did it. But I think they would, because if you're sitting on the fence about a proposal, if there's a proposal like the Dash Italia one to feed the school kids, if you're sitting on the fence where you're like, kind of, okay, shall we give this money to feed the homeschooling kids, or shall we put it in our own pockets, knowing full well that you're not really going to be able to quantify the benefits either way, chances are, even me myself, I'll be honest, I'll say I'll put it in my pocket then, because why am I going to give it to the kids in Italy when I can give it to my kid in Bedford? I will keep the money, thank you very much. So I feel like it's lovely to think that all of the Masternode owners are that altruistic, but in reality we're not. I am not. I will take the money and I would vote it down. So I guess it's a difficult thing, because we are speculating, and it then does end up coming down to opinions, and opinions are shaped by experiences, and we've all had different experiences. But for me, I know myself personally, when I start sitting on the fence, if there's an angle where I personally benefit, then that's what I'm going to vote for. And a lot of people
I've always thought that if voters don't initially comprehend that just the inflation, just the creating new coins that are very well likely to be sold in one way or another shortly after the block reward, that if voters don't already grasp that inflation diminishes their holdings in the first place, that there's really not much more that can be done. Like, am I crazy? I guess that's been my thought.
Yeah, I guess I think for the people who have been in crypto that long, we are constantly considering things like inflation, because it was one of the driving forces for us to get here. I think for new people who are just joining cryptos, I don't think inflation and economics or tokenomics, I don't think it's at the forefront of their mind whilst they're here. They're here for a different reason to what the sub or the pre-2017 crowd are here for. They're not all of them, but a lot of them are here for a different reason. So it happens. I don't really see the logic in it, but I guess we're a different generation. Crypto moves that quickly. We're a different generation, so they should understand it. But again, it goes back to the thing where I say we need more engagement around DAOs. People need to understand that if you don't pass a proposal, then there will be slightly less inflation, which is kind of good for the network. But the amount is tiny, and that needs to be also said as well. The amount, if you vote down a proposal, the chances of it making a difference are very small, because the amount's tiny. But same when we're talking about giving the Masternode owners the reward, the amount's going to be tiny. So even if I vote something down, I guess the person who put that idea forward would say that the amount will be tiny. It's not going to be a life-changing amount. I can't vote down Rion's proposal for Incubator and then, you know, go and buy a Lambo, it's not enough money. It will just be small change. So
TL says it's interesting that the Cosmos networks are the examples of good DAOs, and I wonder if this is the reasoning behind platform Masternode voting, because Cosmos and platform are built on Tendermint.
This is something that I touched on briefly I'm working currently on some videos to help the Dash DAO, some like tutorials, and I touched on it briefly, that when platform is made, there will be a lot more opportunities for a lot more things to be done with the DAO. The DAO will change. It will be built on Cosmos Tendermint. That makes sense. Everything's being built on that now because it's arguably the best technology that there is, like in terms of what you can build with it and how many people can build with it, what languages are used, etc. So after platform is built, I think I don't want to speak on their behalf, but I think there will be a lot more things that we can do with the DAO. So what we're talking about now, I think we'll be able to come back to in 6 months or 12 months, maybe 6 years, depending on when they finish it, and we'll discuss what's possible at that time.
Okay, so let's talk about one other thing real quick. PIVX, they recently changed their emission curve, both in the sense of the quantity of PIVX that is created, as well as the allocation. So I think it was something like, correct me if I'm wrong, something like 2 PIV to one constituency, 1 PIV was to another constituency, and then 2 PIV was to another one. So 3, 2, and 1. And then they changed that so that the one that was receiving 1 was the treasury. So every block, there would be 1 PIV created for the treasury, or at least allocated toward the treasury that could be used or not used. And then they changed that to 10. So they 10x'd the treasury. And then they also increased like the amount that's going to stakers and Masternode owners as well. So they completely inflated the supply rate, as well as changed the allocation to vastly favor the DAO, the treasury. What do you think of that? And have you seen any major differences in like how much is getting funding, and is that creating more value? Because one of the biggest criticisms of doing something like that is like, okay, you're creating more coins. That's more coins to sell. That's going to put downward pressure on the price. But as XKCD has noted, since they made that change, they've actually outperformed Dash on price as well, or on price at least. And I'm asking you, Cryptosi, have you seen any noticeable difference in the value being created by that extra funding that the Treasury is getting?
Difficult one. Okay, so we'll start at the beginning. I once again, exactly the same arguments as I put forward to you when you was discussing it. I've said that we shouldn't just be inflating it. I wasn't the only one though. In PIVX's case, I might be speaking out of turn because I'm not that up to date, but as far as I'm aware, in PIVX's terms, the then core developers were also not happy with that amount of inflation. They were also not happy. The problem that we've got in PIVX is the same as the problem that we've got in Dash, is that these DAOs are very young, and because of the Masternode system, they're not very well distributed. So there's a handful of people who believe that something should happen and they can jam it through, and that's what's happened.
Wait, what was the major reasoning for that if there were so many people that were unhappy about it?
I don't know if there were so many. That's why I mean, I can only speak for myself. I felt like it wasn't the right thing to do, but I think unhappy is the wrong word. There's a proposal put forward to increase it by this amount, and I'm like, well, I think that's crazy. But what it done is it's given PIVX a quite massive budget. So it means that they can hire quite a few more developers, and that's what they've done. And I feel like
Well, and somehow it passed. So
yeah, because
didn't the majority like it? Because that
no,
otherwise how would it pass?
no. We know with the Masternode system, it's not about the majority. It's a straight plutocracy. It's about where the money is. So
I'm talking about the majority of the money. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the majority of the money is not the majority of the people. The two are very, very different things. So,
Yep,
in Dash, let's say, well, they used to call them the Dash Kuza. There'll be 5 to 10 guys who have got, well, maybe women who have got heavy hands. It's the same with PIVX. There are 5 to 10 guys who've got heavy hands, and I would say that those were the guys who said yes, but I don't know who the guys are who said no because they don't have heavy hands. So
but they're the ones that have the most to lose, right? They would be the ones that have the biggest stash of PIVX to potentially decrease in value. So the fact that they had some kind of, I'll call it foresight or whatever, or insight to say, well, even though I have a lot of PIVX and the price may tank if I increase the emission, they must have seen it they must have seen it differently.
Yeah, I don't really like that argument because the fact that you've got the most to lose doesn't mean you won't lose it. The people, well, one of the guys who does want to do it, I'm not gonna dox him, but one of the guys who did want to put it through, I know he's very smart, very, very smart, one of the smartest people I know. Doesn't mean he's never wrong. He's sometimes wrong. Do you know what I mean? So the fact that they've got the most money, I don't think, or the fact that they've got the most to lose, I don't think is a valid point to add to say that it's the right thing to do. I think also when we compare what's happened with PIVX and Dash since they've done that, I think that there are a few things at work. There are a few things at work here. I think that with PIVX, they're spending their development dollars on features that are getting pushed out very quickly. I feel that Dash is in a situation now where it's spending a lot more development dollars on things that are being pushed out very slowly. So on one hand, you've got Incubator, which is pushing things out, which we can say, okay, there's this, now there's this, now there's this, now there's this. On the other hand, you've got the big specter of DCG, which is pushing out one thing per decade, let's say, because if they do evolution again, it won't come out until the next decade. It'll be over a decade. So I think that's the difference. Also, we're in a bear market, and just because one thing is falling slower than the other, I don't know how much I would take from that. Also, finally, the metric of market cap, I think, is a wrong one when we're talking about how successful a project is. There are plenty of other metrics. How many people are
for a lot of people, that's the only metric that matters.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't think it's a good metric, especially not when you look at a project like PIVX, the size of it in comparison to the size of Dash in terms of market cap. If one is doing better than the other, I don't think it means that much. Not to say that PIVX isn't doing better. I feel like for the size of it, I think it's always outperformed its size. It's always done more than it should have done. In this particular term, I wouldn't say that them increasing the budget as they have and the Masternode allocation as they have, and then how they've done in comparison to Dash is validation that they were correct to do so. The fact that they've now got, I would say, an overweight development team which is pushing out more than you would expect, or more than you expect from a project that small with such a small market cap, I think that is probably, that makes me feel like maybe it was the right decision. And the new sell pressure is being eaten up by people who are saying, well, this tiny market cap is producing more stuff. And I feel like that might be where Dash might not benefit from an increase in emissions, because it won't be going to the people who are producing quickly. It'll be going to the people who are producing slowly and under a lot of criticism anyway, without me adding to it.
Yeah, would you like to read this question, Ryan?
You go ahead.
Okay. PME asks, Cryptosi, you've said the tooling is fine, but emphasis needs to be on the social side of things. Organic undertakings seemed more common in Dash, I'm assuming, in years past. How can that be regained?
Organic undertakings? I don't know what he means by that.
Probably just people doing stuff out of their own.
People being pumped,
good
excited.
heart, whatever. People being pumped and doing stuff without being paid for it, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I think crypto's changed. I think when crypto started, there were a lot of people doing it because
it's really easy to get pumped about a new project. It's really difficult to get pumped about a project that's had 10 years to mature. And that's what, Dash is coming on that. So I think that it's hard to compare a new project from an old project. But I will say, Pete, I just shared a screen. I just wanted to bring up the Reddit post real briefly at the end here. I'm going to go through these in a lightning fashion. Yes, I will try to increase this font size here. Menu bar goes away. There we go.
Nice.
Okay. This is basically just your post replying to our 2 weeks ago discussion, and I'll let people read that first paragraph on the screen. And then you said, I'm against the increase of block rewards for Masternode owners, and I'll bullet point why. It's moving the goalposts. I'm going to just do in a lightning fashion, kind of respond to these real quickly. It's moving the goalposts. So the history of Dash, early on, Evan actually moved the goalposts and the early developers many times. And I think that actually might have been one of the reasons for our early success, and not moving the goalposts. In other words, being, stable or stagnant, if you want to use a different term, might be the reason that we're kind of in a slump. It's increasing potential sell pressure. Yes, it is always increasing the amount of a coin issuance. Always increases the potential sell pressure, but it's also always increasing the potential interest and the potential value created for what you're compensating this extra Dash for. So if you create some more Dash, in theory, you're creating it only to give to people who have produced value or who will produce value. And so you always have to just balance that. Is the increase in sell pressure commensurate with the increase in value that was created? It gets Masternode owners to earn enough rewards for more Masternodes quicker, thus centralizing distribution. So in the PIVX example, which isn't what you're replying to here, but just in general, if we increased our treasury by 10x, and again, I'm not proposing that, but PIVX did it. What is that doing? It's actually diluting the existing owners, not making them more centralized. So in that sense, creating new Dash for a treasury would actually dilute the existing holders. And another way to say that is increasing the amount of different users that potentially your project could have.
Sorry to cut you, Rion. Was the proposal, or as the discussion had gotten to, it's not quite a proposal yet, was all of the increased or the quicker emissions, was the new added emissions going to go purely to the budget, or were the Masternode owners set to get more as well?
It was set, that proposal, and again by Michael, by Doc Agnew, was to increase the yield for Masternode or existing Masternode owners, or potentially new Masternode owners. Because if you increase the yield for the Masternode class, then you might get more people saying, hey, that yield looks interesting, more interesting than the TradFi. And it was also supposed to be only temporary.
So why did you mention the budget at that point?
I just mentioned it in a more general sense. So
right.
I know you're replying to a specific case here, but I was replying to a more general case. Okay. But the same logic applies. If you increase the yield for Masternode owners, you may potentially get new people joining as Masternode owners, and that would actually do what I was just saying by making it more distributed and more decentralized, more different people. But it's all, who knows if that would actually.
Well, there is. Sorry to cut you again. There is some kind of, not, I wouldn't say precedent, but DAI, which is a algorithmic stablecoin, they recently increased their savings rate, which is almost it's the closest thing they have to an emissions. They recently increased theirs, like quite similar to this, to go toe to toe with the US interest rates, and they've found a lot more people have started to put their crypto into DAI. So that what you're saying, it has happened for DAI. There is something of it happening, and they put theirs through as a proposal as well, and it hit the same hurdles. They put it through, and it does seem to be working out for them. Their use case is a little bit different though.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to skip that one for now. I think it's a little bit too much to read. Let's see. The APR has not been the main draw with crypto. It's always been the capital appreciation. I agree with that. I think it helps though. Like if I'm going to invest in Dash and get zero yield, that's much less appealing than investing in Dash and getting 8% yield. It's just a matter of degree, but I agree with your point in general there. These last 2 points are probably too big to talk about as well, but I'm putting them on the screen for people that want to read them. I think we addressed that last one as well. So.
Right. I think this one. I think we should discuss this one. The top one here.
Go ahead and read it then.
Yeah, Dash does not have the best tech in crypto. There is still room for improvement in this area.
Ouch.
Yeah, I know that will upset people, but you know it is what it is. We're talking about a 10-year-old project here. In this area that will lead to increase in adoption and demand. This argument is supported by the fact that development is still ongoing to create features that exist on other chains already, and an incubator that's still churning out useful software. Because of this, I don't think the line of what else can we do, which may become the slogan, should not gather momentum. So basically what I'm saying there is that there are other things to do. One of the arguments that when they pushed it through on PIVX, one of the arguments were, if we don't do this, what shall we do? That type of scaremongering we do get within regular government. We do get that within governance. It happens quite a lot where you'll say, okay, well, if we don't do this, the sky will fall on our heads. And when Rion had made the video, he had said something similar like,
that's me, by the way, if anyone's wondering.
Sorry, am I saying it wrong? Is it Ryan?
It's Ryan, yeah.
Ryan, sorry.
It's okay though.
When Ryan,
in the British or the way the rest of the world would say it.
Yeah. So when Ryan put the video, it was one of the things he said. It was like, well, look, we're running out of ideas here. We really need to do something. And I know we're running out of time, but I think it's important to hold people accountable and to say, well, there is a core group who for years have not delivered the things that they said they were going to deliver, and we are now talking about features which other chains have and have had for years. Even when these features get released, end users are going to be like, well, I can do that on Cosmos, I can do that on Ethereum, I can do that on this, I can do that on that. And currently it does feel like there's still this kind of clamor and this adulation and this cult-like following towards developers to say, okay, regardless of what they do or what they don't do, we still feel that they're correct. And I feel like we can hold them accountable like you would with a sports team. If your star players aren't performing, at some point you're going to say, okay, well, listen, you guys, you're not stars right now. You're not pulling your not weight. You're not doing very well. You're not doing these things. Before I feel like we should say that before we turn around and say the only thing left to do is to increase emissions. And that's the point I was getting at with that. I know it will upset developers, and some people will say, oh, you know, like what I'm definitely not qualified to say, but from a results point of view, they simply haven't delivered. And with that being the case, I feel like they should deliver before we start saying we must increase emissions.
Okay.
Yeah. I have one final question for Cryptosi.
Yeah.
Why, Cryptosi, do you own a Dash Masternode? Why do you find it worth holding 1,000 Dash?
I feel like there's not very many real cryptos left. There's not very many cryptocurrencies which really are trying to be currencies, and I feel like Dash is one of them. I feel like being battle hardened, even if it means you have to develop slower, even if it means you end up carrying a lot of technical debt, or the developers do anyway, it becomes more difficult. I feel that those things are important. I feel it's important that this thing has been alive for so long, and it's worth it. I feel like as long as it's not dead, it's worth holding, because it's got a chance. And if the people that are around start to galvanize and harness their collective intelligence and their understanding and their experience, as a lot of us have been in crypto for a long time, especially in these older projects, I feel like we can still build pretty great things. Platforms around the corner, and I know I've probably limited my chances of ever getting back on a Dash show with the things I've just said, but once these things are built, there's a good chance that we'll be able to bring in developers, we'll be able to onboard them correctly, we'll be able to do all those sorts of things, because we've been doing it for a long time. And I think that's the reason why I still hold one. There are people here in Dash that live on crypto, and you don't get that in Cardano. You don't get it in those places. You don't get it in Pepe Coin. That's just full of people who are in crypto to make a quick buck. They're not trying to change the world. They're not trying to change the way things are. So for me, that's the reason why. I obviously, we could all chase money until we can buy a castle, but sometimes castles ain't the greatest, you know?
Any final comments, Rion? Rion?
Yeah, well, I would say just that my final comment is, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't be invited on a Dash show from what you've said today. I personally am of the type that I like the critical views, because that's how we grow as a network and as a project, and as I always like to say, as an economy. The reason that we have some people living on Dash, I think, is because, at least in the past or in the present, most of their income has come in terms of crypto, or they just don't want to touch fiat. And that's my vision. I think the biggest thing holding Dash back right now, to me, in my mind, is that people don't have a big enough vision for Dash. We think that we're just a software project, or we think that we're just some payment processor or whatever. I think of us as a new economy, and with everything that entails. Economies always have some kind of governance, some kind of government, whether that government is free and voluntary and is a free market government. You know, that's a completely different idea from a coercive government. And we need to use the same tools that they are using. And one of the major tools one of the major reasons that nation states have become so strong in their economies is because they have a
money managers,
a money printer. And I know that's a controversial statement, but that's how you gain users. If you want people to use your currency, you have to pay them for their daily job. I say it over and over and over again, and I will continue to say it, because that's the only way that we will become a sustainable economy and a sustainable money, is if people are actually doing their daily jobs, creating value, using that currency. So I will, I guess, leave it at that.
Sorry, Rion, can I say one thing quickly before we go? I know Pete wants us to wrap up. Quickly, I think I'll be doing...
We've already crossed an hour, by the way. This is the first show that we've actually crossed an hour. So I'm glad to be forging new territory. This is probably one of the most important topics.
This is the marathon show.
We might as well, embrace it.
Stay here for the rest of the night. Pete's happy for it. What I wanted to say quickly before we did go was that it'd be good if what I'll do, obviously we don't have to, but I feel that now we've discussed the emissions and the differences and different things. I think what would be a good thing to do next, what I've seen happen in other DAOs as well, I've done myself, is to have maybe like a Discord call, something like a community hall, they call them in some DAOs, where you just invite everybody within the entire Dash ecosystem to come into Discord and put their points forward. After you've heard everybody speak about it, maybe have 2 or 3 so you can catch people in different time zones. After you've heard everyone speak about it, then you kind of bullet point the things that have been said, and then recap and continue the conversation from there. Because I feel like even the ideas that I don't like, with giving the Masternode owners the money from the proposals that they turned down, I feel that all of those things are valid. They're valid discussion points, and I feel that it will be good to have those discussions probably within Discord, or now within Twitter, as Twitter Spaces have become really popular, or X Spaces, and yeah, continue the conversation from there.
Well, I have to bring up one other thing then, if you're going to say that, because one thing I've noticed is that a lot of people just don't join these things. Like I actually did open up. We were having a good discussion on Discord the other day, and I said, let's have a call about it. Nobody joins. So that's a part of the problem. We have some leadership, but we don't have a lot of followership. You have to have followership to have leadership. So if people are interested in taking part in the discussion, I think there are more ways to do that than there are a lot of ways to do that. Like there are enough opportunities for that. And another opportunity that's coming up is Amanda and Pete are planning, and I are planning an in-person meetup / retreat / conference. We haven't decided exactly what angle we're going to go with it, but I'd like to get people in the same room together to discuss some of these things and to just get to know each other and build some unity. And we'll see how many people are interested in that. I know it's far away for a lot of people. For you, Cryptosi, I'd love to see you here. If you
where is here?
We haven't decided. It's going to be in Utah. That's the only thing that we have decided. It's going to be late September, early October. But we're also encouraging other people to create their own local meetups at the same time, and then collaborate
via video call.
Via video conference. Because that's the best that we can do, right? Any place that you pick on the world, it's going to be far away for a lot of people.
And you'll find as well, people are slower to argue with each other in forums and Discord when they've met each other. When they've met each other in the flesh, they're much slower to argue with each other online, and you get much better discussion after you've met people. So I think it's well worth doing. It's something that PIVX themselves definitely benefited from, having lots of meetups and ambassadors and programs like that, where we got to meet people in person. It's very important. But again, it's another one of those things that's not quantifiable. So if you go and ask for money from the Masternode owners so that you can have essentially a party and get everybody together, then they're going to say, oh, well, what comes of it? It's very difficult to quantify, but at the same time, very important. And I look forward to you guys doing it.
Yeah.
Great.
All right. Well, thanks. And we will have more information about that as it comes out.
Sounds good. All right. Cheerio, everyone.
All right. Thanks, guys. Good discussion. Enjoy.